In this video, we're going to talk about why smart people aren't always successful, why it's kind of important to be dumb in the workplace because it's dominated by midwit. So we're going to cover that in a bit of detail in this video. And we're going to cover the advice of myself, someone who's worked at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and also this contact here who worked at BSG, Boston Consulting Group, and Google too. So we've got a lot of excellent career advice that's coming up here. So let's listen to his perspective first.
But when I went into Google, I met people that really build shit, like really like think, smart. And about 7 years into my career at Google, about 2016 or 17, I guess it was 9 years, I realized all of the really smart people had left. Everybody that I had admired as being really smart were all gone. And what was left were this middle group, and call it 100 to 115 intelligence. And they were all fighting over resources. They were all doing the corporate shenanigans, all of the stupid infighting and politics. And it really made me wonder, why would all of these brilliant people leave a perfectly good corporation? And then I left shortly afterwards. And it got me really thinking about intelligence. And now when I talk to people at Google, and I know quite a few of them, or in corporate world, they all muddle around the mean. And typically these guys are the 105 to 115, take that as a proxy, and they thrive there. And so that's my first point. The super intelligent don't necessarily thrive in corporations. Why is that? In corporations, you have to have a dullness of spirit. You really have to shut your mind off to certain things. You, as a product manager or as an engineer, say, hey, you know what? When the executives say, hey, we need to get growth, you can't turn around and be like, you know what? I've analyzed all of the different projects. They're probably not worth our time to do. We're better off looking at something else. No, you cannot do, even if that's the right answer. Even if that's the right answer, that is absolutely punished in the corporate world. What you have to say is, yeah, oh, wow, I got some great projects. Yeah, let's do this, let's do that. And then blame people for not executing properly, right? Cover your ass. That's how you get ahead in corporations.
Same way as me, and we've had quite similar experiences, even though he's been more in consulting and tech, and I've been more in the finance and investment banking type of industries, right? So what ends up happening is when you have a startup, many of the smart people tend to leave. They maybe cash out, maybe they're in senior roles, and then they hire people who are typically from the middle group of society, which are midwits, right? The bureaucrats, the office politics type of people you see in politicians, middle management type of people. They don't have real intelligence. They have all these time-wasting meetings, all these team events for the sake of it, talking for the sake of it. That's a common trait of midwits, and I'll go through that, what midwit is in a moment after this. These type of people, they talk for the sake of it. It's all about pretending to be busy, playing the social game. It's all about the appearance of busyness and work rather than actually doing the work. And to succeed in the corporate game, he made a very important point there about the dullness of spirit, which is typically no way to live, and you have to choose how you want to live, but you have to kind of dull your spirit and your senses and your life goals if you want to succeed in the corporate world over a long time. And he mentions, if you do have independent critical thinking skills and you analyze projects and figure out what is actually worth our time to do, then you'll find out how much of the work actually is a waste of time, how much is just to impress senior management so they can look good for their senior management, even if the actual project isn't really changing a lot, it's just pointless work. And the thing is, what's interesting is the most of the office work and projects, even in so-called important organizations like these big tech firms, these big banks, a lot of it is kind of pointless busy work, like I say, to make the manager or team appear valuable to senior management. And the thing is, you don't even have a say a lot of the times on how to make your life more efficient. And if you do, you should keep that a secret. That's something I definitely advise, because you might be able to get a piece of work done in half an hour, but if people are taking 3 days to do it, either one or two things. Either they're really dumb, and a lot of people are dumb in the workplace, even at top companies, and they're just not efficient at getting work done. Or number two, they know the work can get done in a much less time. Maybe they're not as quick and efficient as you, but they spend their time chit-chatting in the office, doing work at a slow pace, because there's no real benefit of working quicker, and they understand that networking and chit-chatting around the office is more important than actually doing the work. And then that's why it's important for you to keep it a secret if you can be more efficient. If you try to help the company make things more efficient, they don't want to do that. They want to have the same old rigid processes, bloated teams, things like that. Based on if the management want to keep it that way, they will keep it that way. And I'm sure the same way you can see the inefficiencies and time wasting, I'm sure many people around you can, middle management, senior management, people like that, but they like it that way. So it's kind of like, if you're really smart, like he says, you're going to struggle to be successful over the long term. You'll see so many average midwit people who are just popular in the office who will be more successful than you. And the whole thing is independent thought really is a red flag. Seeing through the processes and how to make it more efficient, like I said, it'll make you more of a target as complaining about work, even if you're trying to make it better and more efficient. And the thing is, when you want to survive in the corporate environment and succeed, when you're surrounded by these midwits, these kind of dumb, normie type of people, if you want to use that phrase, you have to understand that groupthink is the best. And groupthink is like, what's the consensus opinion, agreeing with that. And whether it's parroting dumb senior leadership's opinions on meetings, which is quite funny, where you'll be on a long, pointless meeting. And if you're maybe more junior or mid-level, you can gain a lot of leverage by hearing senior management say something, hearing other people agree with it, and then chiming in, even if you have nothing to say, like, yes, I really agree with that. Yeah. And then you just reword what other people said in your own way to give the impression you were listening and you do agree with them and you're on their side, and they just value that as like, oh yeah, you really have the right opinions. And having the right opinion isn't having the right, objectively right opinion. It's just agreeing with the powerful people to make it seem like you're participating in your role as kind of a junior employee. And, you know, agreeing over enthusiastically, did briefly in that little clip where he's talking about being quite over the top in your enthusiasm around these consensus opinions and consensus attitudes to work, even if you really do deep down think it's a waste of time. So it's not about being the right answer and being the smart person, it's about being a conformist and groupthink. Now I want to take you through the midwit meme, which I'm sure some of you have seen. And the whole concept is that the people in the middle with middle IQ, they dominate a lot of these corporate jobs. They're just people who follow the trends, follow the consensus opinion, right? Whereas people who have low IQ, people who might be perceived as dumb, or people who are smart, who might have high IQ, they can see through all the lies in the rigged game. So if we have someone who's maybe a bit dumb, they can see that money printing is basically creating inflation, and central banks print money, they create inflation. Now someone who's super smart can understand that. Now you can say, how are these guys at either end understanding this? Is it their instincts at the dumb end where they can just sense things, or their intellect, their intellectualism at the high IQ end? But either way, they come to the correct conclusion. But at the end of the day, the majority of people you have to deal with are these kind of midwit idiots, right? Midwit, MIDWIT, if you want to look into it later. These are basically people who say, oh, expert economists say that if you ignore the rising costs of real estate, commodities, gas and utilities, education and food, then inflation is actually low. And this is giving the example of how people who are midwits, who typically middle management, senior middle management type of roles, they will just agree with the consensus opinion. What do the experts say? What do the official statistics say? What does the newspaper say? What does the official guidance we've been given said? And this is how you come to these idiot conclusions that they do come down to, where the experts actually say that inflation is low when everyone can tell it's high, anyone who just can think for themselves. And that's the problem with these type of people. They're conformists, they can't think for themselves, and if you can think for yourself, they see you as a threat. Right? And they dominate the corporate world. Even if you're smarter than them, the unfortunate thing is they are in a position of power above you.
You make friends. You get buddies that are in management, and you shoot the shit with them, and you get to know them well, because nobody gets promoted because they're more productive than somebody else. You all get promoted. Everybody gets promoted because some manager or group of managers say that person gets promoted. So it really is about your politics and who you know and how you know them, and getting them to scratch your back. For the moderate intelligent people, this is doable. You can turn off the whole rest of your brain to say, like, okay, I'm not going for the right answer, I'm going for my answer. But for the uber intelligent, it's very difficult because you can see it.
So this is quite interesting, right? It's important to kind of make friends at work. If you want to succeed in this kind of environment where it's about being popular, being kind of sucking up to people rather than being smart, That's what I mean about being dumb in this context, right? It's just exactly like high school, right? And people always talk about these movies that they might watch when they want to work in Wall Street, or they want to work high power corporate jobs, or TV shows, things I haven't really watched, but like Wall Street, Gordon Gekko type of movies, Wolf of Wall Street, American Psycho, things like that. But really the way the world actually now compared to previous decades is more like a high school dynamic. So you're better off watching those high school movies like Mean Girls with Lindsay Lohan and other high school movies, because that's how it works. It really is like a very cliquey popularity contest. And what's quite funny is one time when I was losing my patience with a company and I was about to leave anyway, I did mention that to a senior manager who we had a one-on-one meeting. I said, things seem to be more based on popularity in terms of who's getting promoted rather than how productive they are. And I gave him some examples and things like that. And I remember seeing some instances of new employees who joined our team, and they spent so much time like chit-chatting with like the traders or the salespeople. And I understand you got to build a rapport. You got to discuss some productive things in general life, maybe if you want to talk with them a bit generally. But there was so much of that, and then you realize, yeah, it really is a popularity contest. It's not who fits in that environment. If you're kind of outside of that type of social paradigm, it's going to be more difficult for you to survive in your career, right? Because you're not talking about the same dumb, whatever mainstream thing they're talking about, because you have maybe more niche interests. And that's what, again, it profit dumb at work. So figure out what is the popular normal thing they're talking about. One thing this guy was talking about, for example, would be like the local matches, whatever's going on, cricket at the time. What's quite popular and trendy in their particular part of society was Brian Johnson, that guy focused on anti-aging type of things. So I'm not saying all these things are negative, but it's like, it's more focused on the popularity. It wasn't like he was progressing on the basis of his ability and technical skills around commodity trading. So it really does make you think.
The reason why super intelligent people, one of the main reasons, are not at forefront of industry and things, is because the highly intelligent can see the end way before you can. Or maybe you're in the group, but they can, way before these researchers can. They can sit and within a couple of seconds, minutes, figure out what their life path would be if they on this particular path. And it's not that appealing. If you really think about, what a life path would be on working a corporate job 60 hours a week to get ahead, and then the luck involved, and then you go, is it worth the squeeze? Is the juice worth the squeeze? A lot of people on their deathbed say, meh, not really. Not really. So the Uber, and look at this beforehand, a priori, and say like, no, I'm not, why would I do that? Why would I do that? And everybody else in this middling thing, right? Say 85 IQ up to 110. It's like, well, of course you should do that. You could do it all. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. So what if you make, and they know, even without the research on happiness linked to income, which flattens out and asymptotes. As soon as you get enough for living, enough for food, and a roof over your head, and a couple of fun things to do, you're having money just asymptotes on a logarithmic scale. It's 10x, 100x, 1000x. It doesn't matter. Your happiness is kind of capped. And we, even without seeing this research, a highly intelligent person can see this. So what's this of life? It's to be down here. It's to work very little. It's strategy. Right? Because you're still looking out of your same eyes. You're still eating food. It still turns to poop. You're still living in a house. I remember buying my first house. I was like, my wife was super excited. Oh my God. I'm like, this is the same as an apartment. It really is. Except now I got to do maintenance. And that's life. And as an intelligent person, they look, I don't know what to call them, mental or something, but you can look out into the future and just see, like, no, that this human experience would be very similar if I $1 million a year, 10 million, 100 million, 500 million. It doesn't matter.
So he's got an important point here, right? And this is the thing: if you're not midwit, maybe if you're at either ends of low IQ or high IQ, you can kind of come to a quick logical conclusion. Oh, should I do this for the rest of my life? Do I want to do a 9 to 5 for 45 years? What's the point? How much of my job stability actually exists with these layoffs? Do I have to play this fake character for the rest of my life? Does that make sense for me? And that's the thing. A lot of these corporate roles, people can see through it. And the thing is, the normies, the midwits, however we want to describe them, they typically don't see it's a rigged game, and you have to kind of, like I said earlier about dulling your spirit, or kind of dumb yourself down just to double your dollars, which I put there, which is a Jay-Z lyric if you might remember it. But essentially, yeah, you got to play this kind of dumb character to survive in this type of rigged situation. Meanwhile, everyone else is gaslighting you, the normies, the NPCs, saying you're wrong, you need to fit in, you need to be more like this, dress like this, speak like this, have the same interests as everyone else. And the thing is, right, as he mentions here, yes, money does impact your happiness, but up to a point. After a point in time, you want freedom, you want a slower pace of life, you might want to work slower, you might want to realize that, you know, there's not a lot of payoff from getting the next promotion, maybe you want to be more average and like just enjoy your life at a slower pace. And if we look at this diagram here, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a famous diagram, which just shows what do humans need to provide them with a sense of fulfillment. Initially at the bottom, you need the basics, food, water, shelter, clothing, things like that. Then you have safety needs, employment, personal security. And what's interesting here is a lot of people are stuck or constantly dropping down to safety needs because of the layoffs, right? Because of the inflation, right? People are depending on basic fulfillments, you know, they're always stuck in safety needs or psychological needs because inflation goes up, then food costs more, then they're kind of in survival mode. They lose their job, then they need to quickly find another job. So while they're trying to pursue the higher needs, which would be love and belonging, family, relationships, friendships, esteem, respect, things like that, status, recognition, strength and freedom, self-actualization, being to become the most that one can be or be your strongest or best version of yourself. The point is, like, many people are trying to appeal for those higher levels, but the system kind of is kicking them back down. And, you know, if you want to succeed in a sense under this kind of idea that I'm presenting here, is around being dumb to succeed at work. So in order to fulfill your psychological and safety needs, you need to play a bit of a dumb character, right, to secure employment and your basic living costs. And you can maybe play that character at work and in your personal life be able to be a smart person when it comes to your relationships and having your kind of hobbies and other life fulfillment things, which would be the top 3 parts of this diagram. And I think it's important because it's interesting because, you know, if you do have that, you probably don't want to mention too much of the top 3 at your work, because if your employment and your basic living costs depend on you playing a dumb character and fitting in, things that make you and help you develop a fulfilling life outside of work, typically people in mainstream society look down on. Like if you maybe have gender roles in your family, they might look down on that. So you don't want to mention that at work because that might make you an outcast, or they might see you as a backwards traditionalist misogynist, right? And it's the same thing with esteem. You know, I realize that it's probably true for both men and women, but particularly with men. If you conduct yourself in like a confident way, people think it's you're arrogant, and if you're assertive, they'll say it's aggressive in the corporate world. So you kind of got to be very careful. You always got to dumb yourself down, pretend to be an overly humble merchant when you're at work. It's kind of funny to really think about. And one thing I'd encourage you to do is to think about, instead of climbing the corporate ladder, climbing this pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And if that does mean maybe taking a step back in your career or make some other kind of lifestyle changes in the way you live, this is more of a fulfilling path, right? Rather than looking at your companies, the companies typically have some kind of diagram of this is the level of skills and description of what an analyst is, associate, vice president, director, executive director, managing director, and so on. Rather than seeing your life as like trying to climb those ladders, those things, and meet those competency, you should really think about living a fulfilling life by keeping up with this and seeing where you are in this and how you are keeping up with this particular diagram, right? Because if you're looking at financial freedom, time freedom, experiencing the fullness of life, you want to really focus on this. So even if you're working a corporate job and you're playing a dumb character, I'll really come back to this and really think through to what extent you're providing the fulfillment you need.
So that's one of the first things. So what do they end up doing? They end up doing their own thing. And this is where I see a bifurcation, right, of highly intelligent people. Some of them discover something that is intellectually challenging enough where they dig into it. I mean, Einstein could be in this category. Smart guy could be in this. Maybe Jordan Peterson, don't know. Also, you know, smart guy. And they find something that they're actually interested in and they can dig into intellectually. It's got enough surface area where they can really take it. And they make that their life's work, because that is fulfilling. You live up here. You live right in your mind on what you're experiencing. And using that brain to figure out complicated things is fun. It's exciting. It might not be economically rewarding as it is to muddle through a career and work up to, to be COO or CEO or something like that. But it's much more interesting. And you don't have to, necessarily put yourself in a totalitarian regime to do that, right, in a corporation. So that's a big one. That's a big one. And you'll see this with highly intelligent people. They think about them deeply. And for most other people, they don't get it. You can't even explain what they're thinking. You can't even explain what the language is so inefficient compared to what's going up in the brain, that bringing it over, having, say, 5 different ideas in your head, and then being able to bring that over to somebody who has a moderate intelligence, very difficult. And it just gets frustrating. And you're just like, love to talk to you, but you don't get it. The assumptions are different. People have to take shorthand. They have to accept things as true that are not necessarily true, because otherwise they can't, that cognitive dissonance in their head. And so, like, for instance, having projects that are stupid. I know people that are not dumb, but, they're not in that 140 area. And they just turn it, and they're like, oh, yeah. And they're pretty successful.
And lots of people are living in denial of reality. Loads of people, because they're so dependent on their job, right? They kind of pretend they see the shrinking companies, all the layoffs, and they think just because they're deluded themselves that, oh, well, they'll have this job forever in management or middle management, senior management. They don't realize how disposable they are, even if they think they're quite senior. So if you're a smart person, you can plan ahead and develop unique skill sets and market yourself correctly to get regular clients, maybe as a freelancer. Other things is when you pick up, he's mentioning about doing work projects and constantly having to play along with a dumb game and the dumb corporate game. And one example comes to mind was when I was doing, this is completely ridiculous, but one time in terms of risk management, I had to check the trading floors in terms of where people are seated. So people who have certain information that's quite sensitive, not to share it with others. Now, firstly, if you have a genuine risk management control framework, major investment banks, billion-dollar banks, you should have separate rooms and separate locations for different people who have sensitive information. But again, there's so many gray areas that companies exploit that pretend they have controls over. So I had to review where people are sitting on the trading floor to make sure different teams and their seating plan is away from other teams that might have other sensitive information, so some client information isn't shared with others. Like I say, the obvious way to do it is to have separate rooms for different teams, but they don't want to do it because we have an open plan trading floor, and I'm sure they're not really following the rules they're told to follow. Now, instead of doing a simple thing like checking the floor plan, and we already have logged this in a company system, of course, where people sit in their desks, who's sitting where. I'm sure you all are aware of something like that at your companies. Every company has a seating plan, but they didn't want me to do that. They wanted me to take the seating plan and walk across, hundreds of people on 2 trading floors, and make sure people are sitting in where their name is assigned, right? And make sure certain teams aren't sitting next to each other, and the floor plan is accurate with what's being done on the trading floor. It was completely ridiculous. It's like literally like a school teacher ticking, and taking the register of all the students and where they're sitting. It's like me doing that for grown adults, professionals, millionaires, successful traders, salespeople, and things like that. It was completely ridiculous. But this is what the workplace is. It's just completely ridiculous. You're given these tasks where you think, hold on, is this really the best way of doing it? But your manager and your manager's manager want you to do it, so you've got to do it. And I remember at one point someone stopped me and asked me, oh, what are you actually doing? And then, because they were just a bit suspicious, I'm just walking around. What ends up happening is when you're in this situation where you're doing this kind of pointless work and you kind of know it's pointless, what ends up happening is you end up losing your patience at some point. And that's what I'd recommend you kind of plan ahead for. If you can see you're already feeling a bit of discomfort in the corporate environment, you don't know how long you can do it, and maybe you're even early on in your career, it's best to consider what your future options might be, right? And there's only so long you can do dumb work for big money. It's an option until you kind of get annoyed with it.
Not education. And highly intelligent people know this immediately. When you were a kid, it is like, what the hell am I doing here? Why is this idiot talking to me? And look, God bless the school teachers, but they ain't the smartest people in the world. So they get a super intelligent kid in there and they have no idea what to do. They're like, the kid's running circles around them and they're just like, the kid, why do I have to go through this torture of learning these things? You know they're not going to be that useful, right? We need to revamp the education system. And then when we get into college, it's not about, hey, let intellectualism thrive. I think it used to be there in some colleges.
In terms of challenging people, and that's another interesting thing to look out for if you're smart, right? Or you pick up on signs or you can see through the system, regardless of your IQ level, is when you end up challenging authority figures, challenging your manager, seeing through the nonsense of teachers when you're at school. I remember the only times I got in trouble at school, even though I study hard to get good grades, would be when I'd talk back to a teacher, because sometimes it's so ridiculous. Sometimes the tasks we'll get, it'll be completely pointless. It's a waste of time and you're learning a lot of pointless things, right? And that's the thing. Typically, if you're smart, you can see through and you have good critical thinking skills, you can do this based on your instincts. You don't need to be reading lots of textbooks to figure these things out. And the way the system works is basically built to empower midwits, and that's how the corporations work. The majority of that kind of corporate structure is aimed at the majority of society, which would be normies, NPCs. So it makes sense for me or you, people who kind of think outside the box, who can see through the average idiot propaganda that tends to work on most people. And if you are super smart, like saying, you probably won't make it to high levels of financial success unless you're willing to dumb yourself down for the corporate environment, or you find another solution for yourself.
At our financial means. So highly intelligent people just check out. They just check out. Why spend my blood, sweat, and tears trying to figure out this whole corporate thing when the people I'm talking to are just, they're not all that. Does this resonate with you? Are you in the highly intelligent people? You probably, because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, you probably don't think you are. And if you do think you are, you're probably not. Dunning-Kruger effect is when people know just a little bit, they think they know an awful lot. Anybody like that? And when people know an awful lot, they realize how much more there is to know, and they think they actually don't know much. That's Dunning-Kruger. And one of my favorite principles in psychology. So if you think you're really smart, if you think you know it all, you probably don't. And if you think that you're like a cat trying to figure out calculus, trying to figure out the world, and it's just, holy shit, there's a lot there, you might be a little bit smarter than you think.
So here we go, right, just to finish up. So essentially, this is why many smart people do check out the corporate world, unless you want to conform and it doesn't bother you too much. And often the people who are questioning the system are found out to be correct, right? There's a phrase that's become quite common recently, is that, the difference between being a conspiracy theorist and being proven correct is getting shorter and shorter, and went from 5 years to 6 months because all these things are being exposed. So typically, if you're smart and you can see through the lies, you're not agreeing with the normie talking points, the dumb masses, you're probably right. So what is the answer here, right? If you are kind of smart and you do want to succeed. The answer is not necessarily getting top grades, not necessarily doing extra professional qualifications that other people are doing that waste a lot of their time and money. The answer is you want to take risks. And a lot of people who are smart, they want to be more conservative, more risk averse. But you have to be willing to take risks, whether it's focusing on your side business, making pivots in your career to new growing areas, AI, crypto, things like that, ahead of other people, so you can maybe become a subject matter expertise there and really be able to leverage a higher income. When it comes to job interviews and securing job interviews, you might want to be more risky there. And what I mean by that, you can send out speculative cover letters. And speculative cover letters is basically when you reach out to companies, regardless of whether they are hiring or not, on their public site, and you let them know your skill set, you send them your resume, you email it to them or call them, try to reach out to some contacts based on information online or your network on LinkedIn and things like that. And you try to reach out and let them know your skill set and try to get jobs that way. So you're making yourself more of a one-of-one, reaching out, being more proactive to look for those new growing areas of your industry. And also, like I say, when it comes to career pivots, you should just go for it when it comes to calculated risks. Maybe you're in finance, you want to switch to tech. You're tech, you want to switch to medicine, work in telemedicine, things like that. The longer you stay in a kind of a dead-end job or a place where you feel like you have to really dumb yourself down, you're kind of giving up future opportunities that could be very good for yourself and more fulfilling and maybe high paying too. So rather than just being stuck in a high paying corporate job where you have to dumb yourself down, think about other options. And the longer you leave it, the kind of harder it gets to pivot, because people have, golden handcuffs, which means they're tied to a high paying job. They don't want to quit, but you got to think outside the box. And so that's why it's important to combine being someone who's kind of smart, someone who's willing to take risky decisions. And I've experienced that myself. It hasn't always paid off, but when it has paid off quite well, because I've been ahead of the game and when it comes to making certain life decisions that other people simply weren't, right? And it's really something for you to bear in mind, because dumbing it down can pay off. Like I say, staying in the same corporate role, but being smart and calculated risk can also pay off. So it's important to really think about what works best for you. I worked in the finance industry for over a decade at top sales and trading investment banking roles. I have a link in description for career advice if you want to speak with me directly. Let me know in the comments, do you have to play a dumb character at work? And there are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now. I'll see you next time.